take it easy, Dracula. What do you think I'm carrying here, my dirty laundry?
Where a man-eating, talking plant gives homicide something to think about.
I didn't do it.
Do what?
Whatever.
Ever see this man?
Man, see picture.
Why are you so nervous?
Oh, boy, you kiss good, Audrey.
Oh, I guess I just have a good kisser.
Now you will do as I say.
Yes, master.
You will go out and find me some food.
Yes, master.
What's the matter? Don't you like me?
Too bony.
Too bony? Nobody ever told me that before.
Beef is better than veal.
Ah, you're such a dodo. What do you call this? Chopped liver?
Horror Hounds, welcome to episode 4 of the Black Sunday Tapes Classic Horror. This week we're diving into an old favourite, a really, really fun film. We're going to have a really good time with this one. Maybe one of the most fun films we're ever going to talk about on this podcast. So Michael, let these fine people know what we're discussing this week.
1960s, Little Shop of Horrors. And I had a very contentious relationship with it for a very long time. I grew up loving the 86 version, and growing up, like, my parents were pretty much only letting me watch the Disney Channel, nature documentaries. So my dad was like, oh, no, we're going to watch this movie right here. And I'm treated to this ridiculously over-the-top musical with crazy themes that are kind of creepy and sexual at the same time, and these wonderful practical effects and animatronics. And, oh, I just love it so much. I can watch it forever. I heard that it was a remake of a movie that was in black and white and made very cheaply. Why would I want to watch this? And so I just didn't watch it for a really long time. And then about 15 years ago, I finally caved because I was now a Roger Corman fan and trying to, educate myself more on film. And all of a sudden, I'm like, why is Jack Nicholson in this movie? Okay, all right, fine. Let's watch this. And I was a little annoyed that I hadn't watched it before because it is extreme amounts of fun and a really good example of what you can make in 2 days.
Yeah, so my journey was quite similar, actually. Saw the 80s version first, was completely unaware it was a remake when I first saw it. And then, as I've mentioned before, going down a film rabbit hole as I was in college and studying filmmaking. And I also become a fan of Roger Corman. But the reason I got turned onto this was I was a huge, or still am a huge fan of Jack Nicholson. Reading about this being one of his very, very early performances. Yeah, I had to go and check it out. I had to go and watch it. And I have to admit, I prefer this over the 80s version.
I'm not going to fight you. There's definitely a version of me that would have fought you on that. I'm not going to fight you on that.
Yeah.
But I enjoy them for their own merits, much in the way that, which is better, Jurassic Park, the book, or the movie? That's not a fair question.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's not an argument to be had or a debate that needs to be had. But yeah, for me, I really, really like a lot of what this film was created from. Like you said, the 2-day production shoot or 2.5-day production shoot, depending on, who's telling the story.
Exactly.
But yeah, this is a really, really fun film. And not a hell of a lot to it, but to be honest, it works.
There doesn't need to
because of that. No,
Yeah,
it doesn't.
Exactly.
That's the point. It works really, really well because of how simple it is and how over the top it is. And what I really like, and we're gonna try and strictly stick to the 1960s version here, but
Yeah.
I think across both of them, the kind of over the top nature and the just completely out there storyline and the out there execution of that storyline, it works really well. The filmmakers, they know what they're doing, they know what they had. And yeah, to bring
They're
it back
very
around,
audacious films for very different but also extremely similar reasons.
yes. And to bring it back around to the 1960 version, this was classic Roger Corman.
Yeah.
This was as cheap as possible, as quickly as possible, and make something that turns out to be an absolute classic. Yeah, so let's get into a little background of the setup of this film and how it comes to be. So I'm not sure what you've heard or what you've read, but from what I understand, this film, is very famous for its 2-day shoot, but that was purely born out of the idea of Roger Corman at the time was working in Los Angeles. He was working out of a production office in LA. And another team, another company that was in there, had just wrapped or were about to wrap on a film where they had built this set. And he had been down, he had seen the set, he thought it was very impressive. And he said to him, when's it getting torn down? And they said, well, actually, we're finishing in a couple of days, but it won't get torn down for a couple of days after that. He realised he had probably a 2 or 3 day window to get in there and film this film. So he then went to Charles Griffith, said, right, I need a screenplay, put the screenplay together. From what I understand, it didn't take Charles Griffith longer than a day or two to write this screenplay. They went in there, they redressed the set, and then they made this incredible film. And again, depending on who's telling the story, apparently there were some reshoots later on. So
Well, it also depends on what you mean by the film was made in 2 days, because they actually rehearsed it for a few days.
Good point.
But they shot the thing in 2 days.
I actually saw an interview of Roger Corman.
Oh, right on.
Yeah, where he said that he hired the actors for 5 days because back then it worked out relatively the same price. If you were hiring an actor for 1 or 2 days, you had to pay him quite a substantial amount per day. But if you were giving him a contract for the week, which was 5 days, you essentially got him for the same price or just a tiny bit over that. So with that said, to get this film production wrapped within 2 days, he hired the actors for 5 days. For 3 days, they rehearsed everything back to front, went in for the 2 days on the set, filmed everything they could. And then I think they took out an absolute skeleton crew out onto the streets of LA.
For some pickups,
and filmed the pickups in the exterior. So really, really interesting, man. I love the idea of the guerrilla filmmaking aspect of it. And, that's classic Roger Corman, right? That's Roger Corman top to bottom. But this is ultimate Roger Corman, as in, right, I've got this set, I need to do something with it. Write me this insane story. Let's hire these actors, let's get in there, let's film it, let's get out.
Apparently the kids that run up out of the sewer at one point, he just paid that group of kids a nickel each. Everyone's like, just do this, guys. And they're like, yeah, let's do that. Yeah. He paid winos like 10 cents a day to be a background. And how he chose the one that was the most with it and gave that one a little extra to be the wrangler of the other ones.
I can't remember which actor it was that told the story. I'm gonna guess, right, that it's Dick Miller, because a lot of these stories come from Dick Miller. So I'm gonna guess this story come from Dick Miller. There is a story from the actors, and like I said, I believe it's Dick Miller this comes from, that the reason Roger Corman actually filmed this film so quickly is because the year in which it was shot in December, and come January of the next year.
I did read this. Go ahead.
Right, yeah. Come January of the next year, the Actors Guild rules were changing, which would then implement that every actor or your top billed actors at least within your picture would receive residuals from future plays and future sales of that film. Roger Corman, being as famously cheap as he is, didn't want that to happen. So he knew that he had to get this film filmed, cut, finished as quickly as possible. So there's those stories of why this film was produced for as quickly as it is. You know what? I touched on the actors. I touched on Dick Miller. Let's jump into the cast, because I don't think you can talk about this film without the cast. I think they're all absolutely incredible. They're all over the top in a almost stage-like way. I feel like this film is almost presented as a stage play. And I feel like that's probably why it was ripe to turn into a musical. Because it really does work on that level,
What's easier to convert to something for stage than something that's 90% one location?
Even the way it's filmed, right? Like it's mainly 1 or 2 camera setups.
That's what led to a lot of disjointed editing and butting of heads behind the scenes and all kinds of crazy.
Talking of the disjointed editing, did you read about the famous shot of the moon where
yes,
to the door? And
ahead,
so do you want to tell that story, because I think that's incredible.
So it was 2 people that worked on the movie, and there were these 2 completely disparate shots that they had no idea how to join properly, so they just randomly cut to the moon. And some 20 years later, said people were interacting once again, and one was look, and there was an industry paper with an 8-page essay on the significance of the moon in the film.
Yeah. I mean, how incredible is that? If that doesn't prove that sometimes we completely overanalyze films and certain shots, what else does? This random shot that had, and do you know, did you read that the shot they used wasn't even filmed for this film?
How do you mean?
It was just extra. So that shot of the moon was just extra footage that they had lying around the editing suite.
Okay.
And they just needed something. And because because they had the shot of him walking up to the door, they was like, okay, maybe we could throw something in outside to kind of suggest he's looking outside. So then they found a shot that would work, and it turned out to be that shot of the moon, which was filmed for a completely different film. Threw that in, and then years later there's this 20-page or this 8-page article going on about the importance of the moon in the original Little Shop of Horrors. Just incredible. I love little stories like that. So let's talk about the cast, man. Who really stood out to you? Who from this original really stays with you?
Well, for me, I know we've already talked about him, but it always has kind of been Dick Miller was the standout of the entire picture to me, because the commitment of just eating the flowers and doing it straight-faced. And the fact that everything he does is delivered almost overly serious, that just makes it perfect. And the dentist, he was more than a little actually creepy.
He was very creepy. Yeah, the dentist was an absolute standout in the creep factor, and just like the over the top nature of it all, like that a real stage performance, really jumped out with that. But then I thought there was all like that. I thought Jonathan Hayes as Seymour really played into that kind of over the top, almost slapstick nature. I feel like a lot of it worked on a real slapstick basis, especially not to ruin it for anyone that hasn't got to it, but there's a chase sequence towards the end of the film, and that's very Chaplin. That's very silent era slapstick, kind of very
one of my early
simple
notes was he had a real Jerry Lewis quality.
Oh yeah, there you go. But Jonathan Hayes I thought was really, really great as Seymour. In a role that probably rightfully so is very famous for another famous actor taking on that role. But I think in this original, Jonathan Hayes really adds something to it. And on that note, to kind of connect him and Dick Miller was originally up for the role of Seymour.
Apparently turned it down in favor of the flower eating fella.
There you go. And then fully committed to eating real flowers, which is incredible. The other standout for me, and I really, really enjoyed her performance, going back and watching it for this podcast, I enjoyed her performance. It really stood out to me more than anyone else, I think, on the basis of Dick Miller and Jonathan Hayes and Mel Wells. They all were kind of in my subconscious anyway, I remember their performances. I remember certain aspects of their performances. But Jackie Joseph as Audrey, I thought was incredible. And she had a really, really... Her performance and the way her acting style in this film really reminded me, and this is not horror related at all, but it really reminded me of Rizzo in Grease.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a really interesting, and I really enjoyed the way she kind of played that dim-witted female character you see in a lot of films at these times. But I thought what was really interesting about it, whenever she kind of entered or exited the scene, she was always doing so, kind of keeping the shop together. Like when Mel Wells's character or Jonathan Hayes' Seymour didn't want to deal with the customers, or they were freaking out or whatever, it always come back to Audrey, who up until within that scene seemed quite dim-witted, the same as Seymour very much, but then the customers would always go to her and she would always handle the business of the shop. She'd be the one that would keep it all together, and I thought that was a nice little undertone. I thought that was a nice little undertone. It worked really well for me.
She's the voice of reason.
Exactly. I think she was the glue that kind of kept it all together. So if we're going to discuss cast, and I brought this man up at the top of the show, how can we not talk about Jack Nicholson?
It's kind of impossible not to, because many physical releases of this film featured him so prominently on the cover that most people assumed he played Seymour. And he is only in the film for a grand total of tops 5 minutes. I want to say less.
And the thing I find really interesting about that is that kept changing over the years. So from what I understand, when this film first came out, he wasn't even on the poster. And then as he started becoming more famous and more famous and more famous, that role on the cover started to change. So originally he's not on the cover at all. And then he gets a little bit of fame. Okay, let's put Jack Nicholson on the poster. Then he starts becoming, as you say, you know, the biggest name in this film. Now he's front and center. People think, oh, he's playing Seymour. Yeah, to be honest with you, when I went in, like I said, off the top, I went into this film because I knew it was an early Jack Nicholson performance. I wasn't prepared for how little Jack Nicholson is in this. But with that said, it is so good.
He's absolutely one of the most memorable parts. Just like his counterpart in the remake is one of the most memorable parts, if not the.
Yes. Within that performance, for me anyway, I see a little bit of The Shining. I see a little bit of the Joker from Batman.
Oh, absolutely.
Do you know what I mean? You can see.
You have to see that, yeah.
Yeah, you see all of them.
I mean, just the way he picks up Pain magazine and reads it with that gleeful smile.
Yes, exactly. He's so good. He's so good. And that's classic Jack Nicholson, right? You know, if you're a Jack Nicholson fan, I think it's worth going and watching his film just on that basis, just to see his performance. I think everyone's great in this. Like I said, Jonathan Hayes is great, Jackie Joseph is great, Mel Wells is great, Dick Miller's great.
Mel Wells is the shop owner, yeah?
Yes, he's the shop owner.
Oh my god!
Right,
okay,
let's
talk about the most direct correlation between the original and the remake. It would be, to me, is him, because in the '86 version, it's such a clear, to me, homage to this character. The way that he consistently mispronounces things, to the point where one of my favorite lines, and definitely my favorite little visual that isn't like ever touched upon, is when he says, "No, I'm calling you the president from the United States." And then if you look in the background, there are a couple of times where you can see a sign that says 40% off from everything.
Yeah.
I love that stuff so much.
Yeah, he's really good, man. He really, really plays this up and really adds this whole depth to that character, as I think they all do, in all honesty, that wouldn't be there otherwise. And I think that's a great part of the screenplay. That's a great part of the writing. Again, I touched on it earlier, the fact that this screenplay was put together in a day or two. You know, if legend is to believe. Charles B. Griffith put this screenplay together within a day or two. But there was so much.
The actors all commit to a level that is just over the top enough to be ridiculous, entertaining, and you get what's going on, but also throw enough genuine emotion behind it to... It's a memorable film. I don't care if you think it's a good film. It is a memorable film.
It's a very memorable film. And yeah, like you said, I think the actors play a huge part in that, because they know what they're working with. They know they're making this crazy film, 2-day production, about a killer plant. You know, the most unlikely serial killer of all time. It's incredible. It really is. But they all commit to it. They all commit to it, from the main cast, you know, again, down to Jack Nicholson. He's only coming in for a little bit, but he fully commits to this role. And the other part of that, which I love about it, is it does tie into the overall story. You know, not to spoil anything. I don't want to say exactly how, but it does. His character does tie into the overall story. But the fact that his character is so memorable, and his character is given a bit of time, or they give a bit of time to fleshing out that character. They give a bit of time to fleshing out that dentist. It's something that a lot of screenwriters, I think, would just leave out. A lot of people wouldn't see that is that important, but that is just such great character development. It's writing like that, and actors committing to little plot points and little character points and character development that I feel makes films like this stand the test of time. You could go back and watch this. You know, the first time you watch this, you're probably going to watch it from Seymour and Audrey's relationship. You can go in and watch this purely from Dick Miller's character's point of view. You know, he's such an interesting character in himself. Again, what real purpose does he serve?
I gotta get home. My wife's making gardenias.
Yeah. Yeah, great line. Just such a great line. I mean, he's almost there to break up the tension, isn't he, between the different characters in the shop. But yeah, he's great. And then, you know, to kind of round out the cast, we've got to touch a little bit on the detectives, or Sergeant Joe and Detective Frank.
Yes. Oh my God! I think maybe my favorite line of the whole movie is it's the back and forth between them about the kids. Do you remember this?
Yes, I do. Yes.
Okay, so it's, how are the kids? I lost one yesterday. Oh, how'd that happen? Playing with matches. That's odd. Those are the breaks. It was wait,
So
really?
crazy.
My kid
So
died playing
crazy.
with matches. I'm just gonna be here like nothing. We're good.
Yeah, nothing. So good,
just-
man. Like, but again, I think that just speaks to why this film lasts and why you can go back and keep watching it and stuff like that. So let's get into a little bit of the trivia, a little bit of legend. We've obviously already touched on a little bit of it, but I think there's some really interesting points beyond the, made in 2 days, 2.5 days for $25,000 to $30,000. That's the one that everyone knows that's seen this film. See, I think one of the interesting trivia bits that we already touched on was Dick Miller originally was brought in to play Seymour, but preferred the other role, so decided to go with that and eat the plants. So is there any trivia that kind of stood out to you that you was quite surprised at, or something that you just can't unsee?
I'm certain I won't be able to unhear what I found to be one of the most interesting bits of information, which was that apparently the score that was purchased was by a man named Fred Katz, who wrote essentially the exact same score for the film Bucket of Blood, which was the release just before Little Shop of Horrors. And according to a book written about Corman, each time that Katz was asked to write music, he would give Corman essentially the same score. Now, it wouldn't be the same score in the same exact fashion, but he would take a little bit of this score, take a little bit of that score that he had written for the man, and just put them into a thing, and then give it to him. So a variation of one score was sold to him and used 7 times.
That's the most Roger Corman story ever.
Exactly.
That was definitely done for the cheap aspect of it. That's absolutely amazing, man. So one bit of trivia that I would throw out, which is actually something that you sent me, which completely blew my mind because I had no idea of this. And this is not the reason why we decided to cover it on this podcast. We're already covering it on this podcast. But I know in your research, you found this out, which blew me away. So when the film was originally released in 1960, it actually played as a double feature of a little horror film called Black Sunday. That blew my mind because obviously, if you can't tell by naming my podcast channel after the film and also naming my film festival after the film, Black Sunday is a huge favorite of mine, which we definitely will be covering in this podcast at some point.
Very soon.
Man, how incredible that neither of us knew that and you just randomly discovered that in your research.
Right?
I find that absolutely amazing. That's so incredible. It really is.
It was a total, look at that moment.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, like, okay. So another bit of trivia I think is really interesting is I've brought his name up a few times, but Charles B. Griffith, who is the screenwriter of this incredible film, he also served as the off-screen voice of Audrey Jr., intended to be the voice of Audrey Jr.
Well, part of the reason that I heard that happened was that while he was delivering the lines on set, it got laughs on set. So Corman was like, yeah, we'll just keep that because it'll be cheaper.
Well, I kind of heard that, but also, it was just a cheap fact. It was the fact that Corman decided later on, no, you know what? I'm not paying anyone else to do this. I'm just keeping this in. Which, if you know anything about Roger Corman, sounds completely true.
Oh, absolutely.
Completely true. It really does.
Well,
but yeah, I thought that was a really cool fact.
And actually, the original intent to be the dubbing was female, because when the character was initially created, it was, instead of being Audrey Jr., it was Oriole Bloom, and they intended to use Nancy Culp from the Beverly Hillbillies, who was Mr. Drysdale's secretary.
That's really cool.
Yeah,
that's really cool.
I found that quite entertaining.
That's really interesting. And to follow on from that with Charles B. Griffith, he also plays there's a scene where someone breaks into the flower shop.
There it is.
And yeah, he is that robber.
So in the film, when Seymour's asked where he got the plant, he got some seeds from a Japanese gardener who found the bulb in a plantation next to a cranberry farm. Now, it's apparently a specific reference to something that happened in 1959, where a crop of cranberries were tainted with trace amounts of an herbicide, and as a result, cranberry sales just like plummeted to nothing. So it was a timely joke, but now we're just like, okay.
Okay, yeah, sure. I think that's what's so interesting about this film is there are jokes in this that are of the time, that only
Very
work
much
of the
so.
time.
Very
But
much
there
so.
are jokes that have completely transcended that era and work just as well today, if not better today than they did, back in 1960.
Yeah.
I think that's a huge testament to the film. I really do. I absolutely love that. So the last bit for me that, again, I find incredibly interesting because I learned of this trivia first a few years ago, and then going back and watching this film, I'm like, of course, how did I not notice that before? So Jackie Joseph, who played Audrey, and Dick Miller, who we've spoke about a lot, actually ended up working together on Gremlins and Gremlins 2 as Mr. and Mrs. Fuddiman.
It's right. It's right.
That is insane, man. That is so
Isn't it,
cool.
though?
That's such a great callback. So good. So good. I love that. I love when I don't know if I couldn't find out if that was on purpose or not, but I like to think it was. I like to think that the guys putting together Gremlins were like, let's
They
do
have
this.
to.
Let's put these guys together. Yeah. I
If-
really, really like the idea.
If you're Joe Dante, there's no way you haven't seen Little Shop of Horrors.
Oh, there's no way. There's no way. Joe Dante's definitely seen Little Shop. Definitely seen
Exactly.
Little Shop. Right, ladies and gentlemen, I think we're going to end it there. This is a really, really great film. I really can't recommend this one enough just because it's really fun. The other films we
Go in
recommended.
expecting to have fun. And you will.
Yes, exactly. Just go in expecting to have fun. And I think, we said that about 13 Ghosts, but back in the day, we said we kind of believe 13 Ghosts may have unintentionally been making a comedy. It definitely plays as a bit more comedic now. But, back in the day, Little Shop, this was made for comedy.
Oh,
It
they
still plays as
understood
comedy
what
now.
this was, yeah.
Yeah, if you've enjoyed any of the other films we've recommended, if you had already seen them films and you were fans of them and that's why you're listening to this podcast, definitely go and check this out. If you have seen it before but haven't seen it in a long time, which was the case for me, go back, watch it. I guarantee you're going to have a good time. It's such a fun film. I'm genuinely considering about this weekend just watching the color version just because I had so much fun watching this black and white version. I really do love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to see what kind of yellow they make the vest on Dick Miller.
Oh, hell yes. Yes. Yeah, guys, go and check it out. Let us know what you think. Let us know your thoughts. And until next week, stay safe, horror hounds.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.